can we best advocate for change? And I just got a message from Umberto that I am on mute. Good, now we go. Welcome, Umberto.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back from lunch, everyone. This session is about the state of parental and paternity leave and how we can best advocate for change. We know that fully paid non-transferable paternity leave and other kinds of care leave are some of the keys on moving the dial on unpaid care. But how can we make this happen? Can we include the non-formal sector? And a question that came up yesterday as well, how do we keep a feminist perspective on this? I would like to start with a practical exercise and ask everyone in the room to please stand up. And I would like everyone who is not a parent to sit. So all the parents remain standing. All the parents remain standing. So then, good point. Okay, can everybody please stand up? Can everybody please stand up? Everybody please stand up. And can all the parents and caregivers please remain standing? So somebody who has cared for a child at some point. Then those who have at some point been the primary caregiver or done the most of the care work, more than half the care work, to remain standing. Then for your first child. Then all the caregivers and parents who had access to paid leave for that care. Access to paid leave for that care. And then all the parents who had more than 3 months paid leave. More than 3 months paid leave. Okay, so we can see we've got our work cut out for ourselves. Please, you may all return to your seats. Thank you so much. We will move to our panelists, and we have got quite a rich set of contributions now. I'm very happy to introduce our various panelists. I will also ask them to introduce themselves. Umberto Catania from the International Labour Organization will present first. Then we have our friend Jens Karberg from MEN in Sweden, Men for Gender Equality previously. And then Rachel Plum, Rachel, who on the program appears incorrectly. Rachel is in fact a independent consultant, but she was very involved in the advocacy in the Netherlands, and she is representing herself and in consultancy with Emancipator and Radkes on this presentation. And then we have our friend Sebastian from Oxfam US, and then we also are very happy to welcome Latifa from Morocco here to present to us from the government perspective on parental leave. I will pass to Umberto to present. And Umberto, we're aiming for about 10 minutes, and I will keep time over the chat. But we can see you, we can see your presentation, so you are welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you very much. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Umberto Castanio. I'm an economist in the Gender Equality and Diversity and ILO 8 branch of the ILO Working Conditions Department. And I would really like to thank Promundo, MenCare, and the Sonke Gender Justice for inviting me to this meeting. And I would like also to apologize for not being present in person, but I had a very tough end of the year schedule. So I will briefly present some of the findings that are relevant to the topic from two major ILO reports. One that you might already know is the Care Work and Care Jobs for the Future of Decent Work report, and another one that extended the work that we have been doing in the Care report is the Quantum Leap for Gender Equality report, which was launched for the 8th of March. In this series of reports, we have defined the care work, and we have shown why care work is important and how it affects women and men's labor market opportunities, and actually what are the policies that can be put in place to reduce and recognize and redistribute the amount of care work that is done by men and women. So care work is identified in the report as direct personal care or indirect care activities, and it can be paid or unpaid. It has been recognized for the first time in 2013 by the International Conference of Labor Statisticians that identified unpaid work as work. But this is not, as we will see afterwards, this is still not enough to have a full recognition of unpaid care work. In the report, we also identified care jobs that are the ones that actually work for pay or profit to ensure that the policies that the policies related to unpaid care work are in place. For instance, care workers are those employed in health and social work, education, and domestic workers. The framework of the report is framed around the unpaid care work, paid work, paid care work circle, which is a very simple framework where we actually since the historical under-evaluation of unpaid care work, we thought that this historical under-evaluation of unpaid care work has spilled over to paid care jobs. So if we look at the statistics on gender gaps, in gender wage gaps among paid care workers or the earnings of paid care workers, we can see that these are the lowest. And so this is because unpaid care work has been usually identified as women's business and as something that has been undervalued historically. On the other hand, this circle shows also that since unpaid care work is imposing a burden, as we see, especially on women's shoulder, this also affects their labor market opportunities and the progression in their career. In the report, we have shown that we have found, using data from time use surveys, that women basically shoulder 76% of the total time spent daily in unpaid care work, and this represents 4 hours and 25 minutes per day, while men they only do 1 hour and 25 minutes per day. This makes the situation that we can see in the graph shows that women are in general time poorer than men, because on the top of unpaid care work they also carry out paid care work, so they work longer hours and longer days than men. One of the efforts that we tried to make in this report is to value this time. Why is it important to value the time spent in unpaid care work? Well, it's important because when unpaid care work is when, for instance, a woman or a man decides to spend less time in unpaid care work and join the labor market, more GDP is created. But when a person stays home doing unpaid care work for their children, for the elderly, this time is not valued in GDP. So it is very important to basically value this, and we have done this through minimum hourly wages. So we have basically valued the time that women and men spend in unpaid care work using the minimum hourly wages, and we have found that in the world, unpaid care work accounts for 9% of GDP, which is a huge figure. And this varies by GDP by region. Of course, it is higher, as you will see, in high-income countries because the minimum wages are higher in these countries. So you have you have the 18% figures in high-income countries when the time spent in unpaid care work by men and women is valued. So basically, it would be crucial, and this is an effort that the ILO is currently pushing, to value unpaid care work, so that policymaker can actually make trade-offs and see what if, for instance, they found a new parental leave policy, or they open early childhood care and education institution, they divert funds to these facilities. Basically, they will show, they can value that this, because in this way, without including unpaid care work in national accounts, it's very hard to see an improvement of GDP. So one of the main findings of the report is that the main reason why women are outside the labor force is because they do unpaid care work, and it represents 660 million women in that condition, and only 5.8% of men who are outside the labor force are so due to unpaid care work. And this is mainly done by a lack, we have found, by a lack of parental leave policies, of early childhood care and education, and often, as we will see, a continuation of the benefits between parental leave and early childhood care and education, because parental leave is very important, but at the moment that parental leave allocations are over, there should be early childhood care and education that takes care of the children, because otherwise the negative effect on women's and men's labor market outcome is perpetrated, because after parental leave, the children need to be cared by somebody. Another, this is, I think, it's very relevant to this panel. Basically, what we have shown, just for a number of countries, not for many countries, because it's not easy to find this kind of data. We have shown in the report that the time spent in unpaid care work increased dramatically with the presence of young children, especially by those under 5 years of age, and then decreases when the children grows up, also because there might be synergies and economies of scale between children that can help the care for younger children, or they demand less care work from the mothers and the fathers. One of the major findings of the report is that mothers face 3 labor market penalties and a penalty basically in accessing the labor market. As we can see here, the penalty for mothers has increased between 2005 and 2015 by 38%. So it means that mothers in 2005 were slightly better off. So this is an alarming trend, and we should really be mindful of that. And also that fathers are actually at a premium in terms of labor market participation when they are so. The second chart is showing that even when mothers and fathers are in employment, there are specific patterns that apply to them. Mothers tend to face a wage penalty, because they usually can take employment part-time, or they can be employed in occupations that require a lower level of skills due to the fact that they need to juggle both paid work and unpaid care work, as we have seen in the chart before, while fathers are actually facing in some countries a premium in terms of salary when they are so. Another penalty that we observed in the labor market is that women with children have more difficulties in reaching managerial and leadership positions than men, because actually only 25.1% of managers with children are currently women. This chart shows one of the potential reasons why we observe these patterns in the labor market is that basically when there is a first child, the number of hours spent in paid work by women decrease, while the number of hours spent in paid work by men increase. And this is actually worsening when there are more children in the household. As I was saying before, this basically early childhood care and education is crucial, and it's crucial that it's actually timed with the parental leave. And what we have found is that there are just a few countries in the world, including Denmark, Slovenia, that basically have parental leave that is actually in line with early childhood care and education. So we basically are showing here in this chart that only 18 only 18% of children aged 0 to 2 are currently in an early childhood and education facilities. And the next chart shows that the gross enrollment rate for pre-primary programs is slightly better, but not so good as we wish, because only 60% of children that are aged 3 to 5 are in pre-primary education. Just to briefly conclude, the framework of the report is the 5R framework. It applies not only to unpaid care workers, so reduce and redistribute the time spent in unpaid care work, perfectly in line with the MenCare report that wants to reduce the time that mothers and fathers spend in unpaid care work and equalize, but also looks at paid care workers, ensuring a good reward for them, because we, as I mentioned in the beginning, there is a penalty for care workers, but also good representation in social dialogue and collective bargaining institutions. Thank you very much. I hope I stick to the time, and thanks.
You did very well. Thank you so much, Umberto. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Jens to come and present, please. Umberto, if you can maybe just stop sharing your screen, and then we will have Jens's presentation shared.
Okay, I stopped.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks to you.
Should I start? Or?
Yes.
So, my name is Jens Karberg. I come from the Swedish organization MEN. We work against violence and for gender equality. We're a member-based organization that started in 1993. And I'm very happy to be here and present a bit of the Nordic and the Swedish context. If I could get my presentation. So we can take even the next slide. So this photo is taken in 1974. It's a proud family baptizing their actually second son. The young kid on the right is my little baby brother. He's carried by my grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1916 in a small village north from Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. And in that time, she was born in a family with 10 children. And in Sweden in 1916, women were not allowed to vote. Fast forwarding to 1949, my grandmother has met a man, my grandfather. They gave birth to their second daughter, my mother. She was born in 1949, where abortion wasn't legal in Sweden. You have to go to Poland to get a legal abortion. 1971, my mother and my father got me. It was in a country where parental leave were not found. Now, if I could get the next picture. Now it's 2019. These are my son. When I got them, I could share the parental leave fully with my partner. And Sweden was seen as one of the most progressive countries in the world. That is just a bit of a background on the transformation, and I think, especially for me as a man working with gender equality, it's important to acknowledge all the work that has been done from individual women and women's organizations throughout the history. In Sweden, it's been a work done for the almost 200 years now by women, and it's important to see that work, especially when you work with Parental. This one was the wrong one, but okay, but it doesn't matter. Just to give you the system in Sweden today. In Sweden, we have 480 days of paid parental leave, of which 390 days you get 80% of the salary, and 90 days with a minimum payment. 90 days of these are reserved for each parent to take out. And 30 of them you can use both parents at the same time. So as you see, this is a very, very generous system. Yeah, thank you. So this graph shows the outtake of men and women in Sweden. As you might remember, the picture was taken in 1974 when my baby brother was born. My father obviously got a child in that year. Do you think he took parental leave? No. And so did almost no fathers. 0.5% of the parental leave was paid out for fathers in 1974. 20 years later, in 1994, about 10% was taken out. What has pushed this is, you can't really see them, but the first non-transferable month came in 1995 as the second country in the world after Norway. 2002 we got the second one and the third one in 2016. And this is almost the outtake of men, now almost 30%. If we do a projection, this projection shows a year of 2039 where we would share equal. I'm not so sure about that. It actually very much, I think, depends on how we reserve months for parents. State of the Nordic Fathers, we did together with Promundo for the Nordic Council of Ministers. And it's a survey on 7,000 people in the Nordic countries. And what is interesting in this survey is that, it shows that fathers and mothers want to share parental leave equal. And also that both fathers and mothers, 96% of fathers and mothers think they are capable as parent. And if we ask fathers, they also believe that they share child care equally. But when we control that with mothers, they say they don't. And this is important because this is also, we see in the research that what the mother is saying is quite true. If we look at the fathers that stays, if you can next, stay home, we see that fathers that stay home are more, they are more likely to rely on themselves and not on their partner. They are also more likely to search information in books, on the internet, asking friends. They also don't see that if they even would take out longer leave, that wouldn't have a negative impact on the work that on their work and the relation to their managers. And also that parents that stay at home are also more likely to make changes in their work to actually be home more and care for the children. So just to conclude, parents think in the Nordic region that they are able and competent and that we should share equally. But when we look at the facts, fathers don't take out the parental leave in the same range as mothers do. And this is a very important aspect, and that's why we think it's so important to actually reserve months for each parent. Could I have this last slide? This is also a new report that comes from the women's movement in in Sweden, Norway, and Iceland. And it's pretty interesting. It shows the graphs for the outtake on men in the different countries. We already been speaking about Sweden. This is Norway. They were struggling to get up to 20% of the outtake for men. And they reached that in 2013. Then they reduced the number of reserved days. And you see, it dropped directly. In 2015, they introduced it again, and it keeps going up. The most extreme example might be Iceland, this one. They had no reserve days in 2000. In 2000, they introduced a free-part system where 1/3 was reserved for each parent and the third was open. In just a few years, they went from 4% of the outtake on men up to 35% of the outtake. It just dropped at the economic reduction in Iceland when they had to change a bit of the system. So for me, it's very clear that reserving days will have an impact, and that will also change the attitudes and behavior of the parent that stays at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jens. I also, I just realized that I did not acknowledge Tolu Lawrence, of course, from the Promundo and the Corporate Task Force on Paternity Leave. So you are also very welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining the panel. I would like to ask Rachel Plum to also come and present, please. And let me just put your presentation on. You can start, Sela, if you want.
Good. Yeah, thank you for giving me the floor. And I thought before really getting into the presentation, I thought let me share you a little anecdote. And that goes back a couple of years ago when I was still working for Rutgers, which somehow feels like it's still part of my identity. And we started with a new program. It was around 2012. It's actually the same program Shamsi was sharing this morning about, the MenCare Plus, very much looking at men to engage them as fathers in antenatal care, in sexual reproductive health and rights. And the program was in various countries, in South Africa, Brazil, Rwanda, Indonesia. And I was getting some kind of uneasy questions. And the question was, well, we are talking now about engaged fatherhood, about paternity leave, but what about in the Netherlands? And at that time, I had to tell them, and I felt very kind of embarrassed, that at that time we still only had 2 days paternity leave. And that international connection was very much the beginning of a new impulse for Rutgers within the organization, which later was translated into a strong advocacy strategy in the Netherlands to increase paternity leave. And that coincides also very much with the first version of the State of the World Fathers report, which I think was very pivotal in terms of providing evidence for the arguments from various angles for why paternity leave is important, why engaging fathers is important. Well, that as the start of a presentation of the advocacy case in the Netherlands, how we worked on the increase of paternity leave. I will, from a gender transformative perspective, so I will also give a very short definition of what we mean with gender transformative approach. It's the presentation of the case, and if time allows, I will also do an exercise. Let's start with the definition. Next slide. It's a very short definition. It seeks for long-term changes in gender relations and power dynamics at all levels of society. And what it, in principle, is doing is very much encouraging a critical awareness of gender roles, norms, power, and masculinities, and very much questioning the costs of these harmful norms and redefining them into positive norms by empowering women and girls, by engaging the broader gender and sexual diverse community, and by very much engaging boys and men. And Rutgers starts developing, please, yeah, a couple of training manuals around the gender transformative approach based on 6 elements. It's very much working from the human rights based approach. It's looking at power, unpacking power. It's critically questioning the norms and values, the gender norms, and redefining them. It's very much inclusive towards the sexual and gender diversity. Of course, it continues very much with the empowerment of women and girls, and then engaging more boys and men in a positive way as part of the solution. I brought here the one on the gender transformative approach and advocacy, but so far we have developed now 3, and there are more to come. One is very much on sexuality education, and the first one is going through this training through based on these 6 elements. Well, we try to apply that to the advocacy. And as you see, we always start from the socio-ecological model, meaning that interventions are needed at all these levels: individual, interrelational, organizational, institutional, the community and policy level, and advocacy then interferes very much at the public policy level, defined as a targeted set of activities to influence policies and practice based on reliable and documented evidence aimed at defined audience of decision maker. And the case I'm presenting is very much linked to that level of advocacy to influence policies. Yes. Well, my first anecdote already made clear that Holland, the Netherlands, is often seen as a very emancipated country, but we still have our issues. For instance, if you look at the Global Gender Gap Index, we only appear at number 27, below countries like Bolivia, Bulgaria, which has very much to do with the economic participation of women. There we still score very low. There's a huge pay gap between men and women. And, well, of course, there are various reasons. One is the child penalty. Due to giving birth to children, women stay for a long time at home or do work part-time. That's a percentage of 73. And for men, that's around 20% who work part-time. And part-time, formally defined, is working less than 35 hours per week. But most women work for an average around 28 hours. So we still have to deal with a strong motherhood ideology. Women experience pregnancy discrimination at work. And as I said, until December 2019, we only had 2 paid paternity leave days. What was done? No, let me start with the result. From January this year, we have 5 days paid paternity leave, and from mid-2020 next year, it will increase up to 6 weeks at 70% salary. The start of the whole advocacy exercise was together with Rutgers, Bernard van Leer and Women Inc. and the representation of a strong Bernard van Leer, very much linked to childhood development. Women and the women's organization was very much involved, and Rutgers as a strong SRHR organization, but also representing men's position, reproductive right of man. And the gender transformative approach is very much not only at looking at heterosexual men, but also including partners of gender diverse partners, gay women, gay and lesbian couples. It was intersectionality link was made. And the aim was 100% paid paternity leave, non-transferable, promoting solo care for fathers, knowing that when you do it on your own, that gives much more impact than when you still have your partner around. And it should be open to all partners of mothers. The key strategies, yes, please. One was very much the lobby and public affair activities directed at political and employer spheres. There was a strategy very much looking at getting the public support from men. There was a research component in the strategies, and there was media involved. And it's in the next visual, you can see it. And this was the whole platform. It started, the platform of fatherhood was Rutgers, Bernard van Leer with Women Inc. And they start getting in touch with a range of stakeholders, among which the employers organization, the scientists, so making sure that evidence for every step was there, a broader civil society organization, among which also men's groups. Then from there, you had advocacy towards, for instance, members in parliament, particularly making contact with upcoming fathers in parliament, and very much in connection to an influx of both social media and a lot of publications in magazines. And that together resulted, I think an important element was also that they started doing the advocacy around paternity leave. And it was during election time. So there were a lot of contacts made with political parties to make sure that that was incorporated in their political programs. Family-friendly policies, including paternity leave. And for instance, on the side of the employers, there was a huge concern about costs. But there was actually no real insight in what the costs would be. So one of the actions of the platform was to come up with a tool to calculate the real costs of paternity leave, but also including the benefits. And benefits defined as more women getting to the labor market. And that was very instrumental, because then there was a relief. Now at least we know what the costs are. And then also employers got more open towards other arguments, from the child perspective, father perspective, and mother perspective, the gender perspective. A mapping was done. Who is against paternity leave? Who is influential? Who is not influential and pro? And from this mapping, further actions came. To whom do we have to talk with? What are the arguments we have to use? So this insight was very helpful. And overall, what worked best? Doing that power analysis, that mapping, creating a platform, the personal contacts with young fathers in the parliament, and the unusual allies between trade union, the companies that are front runners, in family-friendly policies, making connections with the fathers known in society, and the collaboration with media, plus the GTA messaging. What is next to finish? This is the final. How we are there now with legislation, which somehow is a big result of this very well-defined, comprehensive advocacy strategy. But the main, if you remember the socio-ecological model, I think at policy level there's a change. At the individual relational level there's also a change. But what is to be done much more at the institutional and the cultural shift? And Holland has its own challenges in that. It's more work to be done on behavior change with fathers, but also very much with women. There are many women saying, it's my free choice. I prefer to stay at home. And I don't like to challenge really that part-time working it's not good, but it's not a fair choice of both. So we still have to work hard. And well, there's a Plan Your pregnancy leave tool launched yesterday. We are documenting this whole case of advocacy, which can inform other countries who are interested to work on increasing paternity leave. We are assessing the possibilities for a broader MenCare movement for the sake of this cultural shift, and hopefully still more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And next we will ask our friend Sebastian from Oxfam US to come and present. I understand we're sharing a lot of information with you. We will go to questions and answers at the end. So please make notes of any questions you have.
So good evening, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. It is very nice to be here with you talking about something that I feel specifically passionate about, which is parental leave. And today I'm going to talk from the perspective of the international INGOs. Many of you don't work for one of them, but you might work for one of them, you might getting money from one of them, and you might be partnering with one of them. So I'll try to convince you why this is important. This is important. So for me, this idea of understanding paternity policy became real when I knew I was going to become a father. That's when I started asking HR, so what is the policy here about having children? What does it mean for me? I'm Colombian, but I live in the US. And in the US, we have no such a thing as national parental leave. So my partner, who's doing her PhD, had 0 paid parental leave. So we knew that that was something that it was very important to us. Fortunately, because I work for an organization like Oxfam, I had 24 days fully paid, which in the US is a huge, huge benefit. And then I went to Leiden in the Netherlands to have a conversation with colleagues about gender issues and all the things that we're passionate about. And then over lunch, we're talking about how excited I am that I'm going to become a father and I'm going to take 5 weeks to be with my son. And then my colleagues are looking around saying, well, I get 2 days. The one, oh, I get 10 days. And I'm like, so we work for the same organization, but we have discrepancies in our benefits and our policies. So something that was supposed to be a right for everybody became a privilege. And I went from being really excited to be very upset about this. So what did I do? The first thing I did is I used a platform that we have at Oxfam, which is Workplace, which is Facebook at work, to try to make this visible. Why? Because I stand on privilege. I have the possibility to take this leave, and it is unfair that organizations like mine, who stand for values that challenge power inequalities, are unable to translate those values into practices. Because that's what we go and preach to the world, right? To say, like, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You should think about X, Y, and Z. And then when we're looking internally, the discrepancies that exist do not match that. So I try to make this visible, stick my neck, and say, can we say this is happening? Can we acknowledge it? At that point, it had 0 traction. There were other priorities, had no momentum. But then it became real to me that then I had a baby at home. So I left that part of my advocacy internally at the office, and I took the time to spend 5 weeks with Rafael, with my son. And this is my first year. Look at how happy I am. I didn't know what I was going into, because I'm Colombian. I was born in Colombia, raised in Colombia, single mom, loving father, but parents divorced, and I learned nothing about caring. Nothing at all, right? So for me, that was a crash course on how to do everything. So I feel extremely grateful for Oxfam and for that chance of having those 5 weeks that I'll never have in my life again. And at the same time, I came way more pissed about the situation for others, because I was so sad to think that many men would go through life without knowing what they were missing. So we have, at that point, Winnie Bianjima was the CEO of Oxfam, and she went to Oxfam America to talk about how the organization was doing. So I had the chance to, raise my hand and say, and stick my head again and say, like, I just want to let you know that there are discrepancies in the organization about the policies that we have. And those discrepancies matter a lot. It matters a lot because we have a moral, existential dilemma. How do we provide the kind of work and care and values in the world if we cannot embody them? If we cannot aspire to do it in a consistent way? It makes visible that unpaid care work is unvalued in practical terms. So we can talk about, unpaid care work is important, we should do it, blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes to put money figures into that, There's no traction. So there's no change. The third one is that you have moral, business, and institutional risks of doing that. As an organization, any of the organizations that you can think of or the organization that you work for might be in the same situation that we were at the moment, which is to say, we say we want to do one thing, we spend money in trainings, we send money to countries to do this work, and then we can't do it ourselves. And finally, one of the things that I loved about working at Oxfam is that transparency and accountability start from the top. So we need to eat that picture saying, thank you for flagging these things. And I think that's important. It shows that there is willingness to change. Can we change? That's a remaining question for me. But at least that transparency and accountability start there, right? To recognizing that when we don't have the answers, we need to start defining what the answers are like. And then the last one is that collective action matters. And why am I saying that? Because you hear a lot about me, I did this, It's not about me. I'm just using the space I got and the soapbox I have to deliver a message. And that message had so much resonance within the organization because many of us who are parents, who are in the process of wanting to have children, who care for others, start to understand the value and the importance to have policies that understand the complexities of life, right? So with a group of people from around the organization, we put a letter together that was signed by 60 people at that point in May, now 120 people, that are asking the organization, please, can we walk the talk? You leadership need to put this as a priority because this is a way in which all the work we do advocating outside the organization for change is reflected. So that got some traction. But before I tell you where did it go, I want to stop here for a second. Because each of us work for an organization. Each of us has the ability to influence how an organization works because we're consultants, because we're researchers. So there is a space for each of us to play a role into how do we make these issues visible. And I want to give you 3 elements of how does that look like and why it matters to us. The first one is the moral challenge, right? Many of us are motivated into our work because we believe in it strongly. And we're passionate about it. That's why we come to Morocco to do this kind of work. So it's like, can we practice what we preach? Can we do that? How can we care for others in many of the work in the international development does if we're unable to take basic care of ourselves and our families? Who can afford to take time off, right? Sometimes it becomes a matter of class within the organizations. Those who are in the higher positions can afford to take time off. Those of us in junior positions might not. Because like in my case, my partner had 0 leave. So it's a very precarious situation that we put people into. And finally, what happens if we follow the money trail? And I think this is very important. Because sometimes we say, oh no, but there's no money for this. But what about those who are funding the work we're doing? So when we go back to the countries and we say, hey, Nordic countries, you do this. Can we do this in the work we do and with organizations we work? Hey, foundations, you offer 26 weeks fully paid. Can you help us chip in to do the same for the people that we work with and we work for, right? So we need to follow the money and challenge those who have the money because that's the way we can also challenge power inequalities. The second one is, do we really value unpaid care work in practical terms? The first one is sometimes the policies that exist reinforce traditional roles. So we have policies that have good policies for mothers or for birthing parents and no policy for non-birthing parents. And that is very binary in the understanding and the conception. And the second one is we need to increase the spectrum of care. Newborns, yes. But there are so many elements of care in our lives. Not only babies that are from birthing mothers, because there is adoption, surrogation. There are multiple ways in which we provide care. We need to amplify that spectrum. And finally, can we afford it? So it was very interesting to hear from the Netherlands that there is, strong backup in terms of how much does it cost. Because we talk about the financial cost, but not all the benefits that are way, way, way documented in terms of well-being, social and productivity benefits. And finally, the transparency and accountability that we want from others is a muscle for ourselves and the organization. So finally, what does it mean and why it matters now? So for me, it matters because, I have a 16-month-old and I have a strong relationship with him. And I really think that it was because of parental leave. I think that I wouldn't have been able to have the kind of trust and confidence I have on myself and I can see he has in me without that. It matters to Oxfam because after 6 months of this work, now parental leave is becoming an issue to show that we can actually walk the talk, and it's happening and it's being done collectively. So it's not about me anymore. It's about the organization and what kind of organization we want to build for others. And this is a practice of the power of the personal is political. We talk about feminism and feminist principles and feminist values. This is what it means like. It means that we need to take risks, but do it with others. And finally, for all of us, what it means is that international NGOs, governments, they're not going to companies, they're not going to change on their own. There's no incentive for them to do that. It's on us to start bringing that change and to start pushing for the change. The second is that our credibility and the work we do relies heavily on that and how we do the connection between walking the talk. And finally, and most importantly, is that behind every policy, there is a parent, a child, a family, and we all deserve the same rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. I would like to introduce Latifa Benayad. Latifa, you can present from there or here, it's up to you. And Latifa will present in French.
Merci, merci. Je vais parler en français. Non, je vais pas. Alors, excusez-moi, je vais parler en français parce que je ne maîtrise pas très bien la langue anglaise. Alors, je me présente, Benayad Latifa, je suis responsable du dossier genre au sein du ministère, enfin du département de la réforme de l'administration. C'est l'institution qui s'occupe de la réforme de l'administration. Je suis très heureuse d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui et de partager avec vous l'expérience de notre département en matière de l'égalité entre les sexes dans le secteur public. Je suis aussi coordinatrice du réseau de concertation interministérielle pour l'intégration de l'égalité du genre dans la fonction publique. C'est un réseau qui a été mis en place, c'est un mécanisme mis en place par notre département pour justement promouvoir l'égalité entre les sexes dans le secteur public. C'est un réseau qui regroupe l'ensemble des points focaux genre de tous les départements ministériels. Vous imaginez un mécanisme qui englobe toutes les institutions pour fédérer tous les départements autour d'une thématique, autour d'une question qui est l'égalité entre les sexes. C'est un espace de plaidoyer, c'est un espace de travail, c'est un espace d'échange et de partage d'expérience. Notre but, notre objectif global, c'est comment institutionnaliser l'égalité entre les sexes dans le secteur public, c'est-à-dire légiférer les
that is to say, the actions and the official aspects. So this network, which plays a very important role and played a very important role in taking into consideration the matter of gender by top management in Morocco. And this network, which has conducted many studies, of course, under the supervision of our department, with the support of international organizations. So we conducted so many studies, one of which about a reconciliation between private life and professional life. What was achieved in 2015, and it was for the first time that we pointed the finger to the problems and the obstacles that hinder the emancipation of women in their work milieu, mainly access to responsibility posts. We are aware of the issue because we are only 16% of representation at the level of higher posts. So this is really a rate that does not honor us as women, and that's why we're doing the advocacy and working in order to increase and improve this rate of representation. So this network, as I said, we did this study and we identified the obstacles and the problems that hinder the life of women globally, especially at work. And thanks to these studies, we could formulate recommendations. Among these recommendations, the paternity leave, among others. We also achieved a few other things. We increased we moved from, thanks to the work that we did within the network, we increased the weeks of leave. It used to be 12, now it's 14. We also institutionalized the leave to breastfeeding. So a woman has 1 hour a day to go and breastfeed. It's very little, but women work 6.5 hours instead of 7.5 to be able to breastfeed their kids. And here again, we put in place, among the recommendations, is that we don't have enough mechanisms for employed women to assume their responsibilities as women, mothers, and wives, and people in charge. A woman who works. So among the recommendations was to put in place kindergartens and structures to host children within or very close to the place where the women works. Here, our department elaborated specifications for the putting in place these kindergartens. It's a document that gathers the norms on which we can encourage us to put in place kindergartens. So the department is in charge of putting in place mechanisms and measures. And this applies to all ministerial departments. That is to say, equality of sexes. So these specifications were shared it with all departments so they can put in place without going through the studies. So we worked for them. So we shared the results with them, and they put in place structures where children of early age were kept. In relation to paternity leave, it's 3 days for men. Within the network, we did advocacy and we worked hard, and we were able to increase. We did not increase, but the department, thanks to this work of the network, has elaborated a draft law to complete the general status of the public service. So we want to move from 3 to 10 days. And within the network, this is very little, we think. It's not enough. So we always ask for more. So we're working on that to see how we can increase this leave. This leave, I can say it's 10 days, but we want more. So we are working, and where the father perceives the the whole of his salary for 15 days. That's what we are considering now. But we are still at the beginning. What's reassuring is that the debate is launched, and we are reflecting on that, and we're showing the importance, because a woman on her own does not manage to do the work on her own, because when we have one child or two, we need to assume our responsibility, and we are two to make that child. So the number of women is very, very low. If we can share the actions on 4, a woman takes care of the children, home, her husband, and her work, which is truly too much for her. This prevents her from emancipating in her work. So among the causes of this low rate of women is the shortage of leave, and the husband does not share with her the tasks, the home tasks, and the education of the children. That's why we went for these options, and we are working to see how we can increase this number of days of leave. So there are many things to say, but I know whether I can go into more details, because this network, 2 minutes, okay. As I said, this network is working and was put in place in 2010, and so far we have achieved quite a few things, and we want to achieve more. For me, this is some achievement to increase the leave from 3 to 10 days. This is very important, but here we're trying to see if we can make it more, and the law is being It's been so we are on the operationalization of this action. This is it. This is all I had to say for the public sector. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
So to our last presenter for this round, Tolu, please, if you will. Are you going to present from there?
Yes, I'm going to stay put. I have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to take all of those 5 minutes to share with you. So I am here today because of the slide that was shared earlier from Rutgers that had the quadrants, and they showed a little closer. Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, no, it's loud. Yeah, it's better.
Yeah. How about this? Okay. But in that slide, it showed employers located right at the nexus of those who are against the advancement of parental leave, but also influential. And so what we are doing at Promundo is engaging those employers in advancing paternity leave specifically, with a lens on the fact that shared cared work is a major part of advancing gender equality. And so in partnership with Dove MenCare, which is a Unilever brand, Promundo in 2018 released a study called Helping Dads Care. And in that study, we spoke to fathers in 7 different countries about the state of global paternity leave. And that's when we learned that 85% of fathers said that they would do anything to be involved in taking care of their children after they're born. We also, I think many of us know, but we also learned that the majority of the world's countries do not offer an option for paternity leave. So, and this is, I think, is about 90 million children under the age of 18 are in these countries. And so with a lens on situations where we don't have a state-level solution, but also with an understanding that this is something that the fathers are actually seeking, often the solution is to look to employers. So that is where we found ourselves in Davos at the World Economic Forum, engaging companies around this issue and talking about the need for paternity leave and where many leading companies were on this issue. I would say I was not at that event, but there was I think a lot of interest in learning more about this issue. And so in June 2019, Promundo, along with Dove MenCare, launched the Paternity Leave Corporate Task Force. The Paternity Leave Corporate Task Force is actually now comprised of companies like Deloitte, Twitter, Facebook, Bank of America, also working with Women Deliver and UNICEF. And the task force is, I'm going to make sure I get this right, but the task force is dedicated to creating a world where dads are enabled and empowered to take paternity leave, so the benefits of men's care and greater gender equality are felt at home, at work, and in society more widely. And so the work that we're doing is really coming together to not only better understand from the employer's perspective where some of the challenges are, some of the things that we're learning around, do they actually even measure whether or not, track whether or not fathers are taking paternity leave when they do have these policies in place. One of the big issues that we're also looking into is obviously has been discussed today, but is uptake, because as we know, even in the countries where they're really getting it right, we still have about 30% of fathers taking the full leave that is available to them. And so the work that we have ahead of us is really in thinking about how we can continue to engage the corporate sector to get fathers to not only see, or to continue to see childcare as a desirable thing, but also to get employers to support them in wanting to do that. So we're addressing corporate policies. We're looking into social norms, and also looking at workplace culture. I think with that bell. I know that was not for me, but it's good timing. So, but in general, that's the work that we're doing, and we're really excited to continue to advance that. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that as we grow.
Thank you so much, Tolu. Sorry about that. So, friends and colleagues, that was a very rich panel, stretching from the ILO from a global perspective to the international non-profit sector to specific cases from the Netherlands and Sweden and from Morocco, and also looking at the corporate sector. We are going to have a session on advocacy this afternoon, and tomorrow we are having an interactive session on advocacy as well. So please take some of your contributions that we do not have the time for now into those conversations, because we will be talking about advocacy and how we enact the MenCare commitment, and where parenting leave fits into that equation is a really important aspect to consider. So please take your questions or comments that do not get acknowledged now into those conversations. Having said that, I really like the way Sam requested this morning that people please ask questions if you are asking questions. And I would also ask that if we take questions, please direct them to one person. Unfortunately, we don't have a time for questions for the whole panel. So please also make your question not so much a speech, but quite a specific question. And then I will open it up. Please also remember Umberto. Umberto, we can still see you on the screen as well.
Yes.
So I'm very happy that you are still with us. I'm sorry that you...
Yes, I'm very...
Good.
Yes, I'm very happy to hear about all these interesting presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay, good, fantastic. So, and I think we might need some support with the microphone. So Shay has got two there. So if we can take a first round of questions, please. So there's a question from Srinivas. And I will take 3 questions and then a round of answers.
Yeah, so I just have a question with my friends from Oxfam. So when we speak in terms of international NGOs, I mean, advocacy is one thing, but many a times that organization that are sitting as the other side of the fence, when you negotiate budgets, NGOs, international NGOs comes and say, oh, please keep your administrative budget, below this. Please cut from here, cut from there. And then in that, how do you expect, so there has to be a, what do you call it, walk the talk. So, I mean, not just within the organization, but also if you really, and in the development sector, if we really want to project, then we also, as a funding system or whatever it is, we also need to, how do you look at this system where you want the implementing organizations to cut the budgets, but while we advocate within ourselves to have more benefits? It's a dichotomy. What do you say?
Thank you, Srinivas. Another question? Yes? Oh, sorry. The microphone is on that side.
I'm Sekina Lawal from Nigeria. My question has to do with the fact that asking for paternity leave, because our experience with Lagos State as chairperson women journalists in Lagos, probably because we've been helping government in the publicity with some of their programs, when Sonke Gender Justice came and we started asking for paternity leave for fathers, the Lagos State government eventually gave a month paid leave for fathers. But thereafter, what we've discovered, because whenever we are doing some of these workshops, we usually have a sheet of pre-test, what their minds are, the mindset and the attitude and some other things. And we make it as anonymous as possible so that they come out with whatever is it, stereotypes, everything they are coming up with. And when we do post-test, we discover that 2 years after, even those fathers that were given 1 month paid leave, they are not staying at home. They are not staying at home. They rather use that period to do some other things. So the fear now is, because we are asking other state governors to do same, And the fear is, what will be if we ask for the paternity leave and it's given, and this is happening, what should we do?
Was that a question for someone specific, or maybe you can decide who takes the response? Maybe Rachel?
Can I add, because I share with her the same opinion. I was going to talk about Egypt. I was going to take you to the national level because we're still fighting for the paternity leave. But the question for me is it quantity or quality? So are we talking about number of days or the quality time that the father should spend with his daughter or son? So maybe I'm wrong, but I guess one of the challenges that I agree with her that maybe they will take the leave and then they are not going to spend it with inside the house. They are going to spend it with his friends outside and enjoying his time. So what's the guarantee that he will take this leave and share the responsibilities? So is there like a condition that we should do? And I don't like things to be conditioned. Things should come from inside to be genuine and to be true. So I'm asking if you faced the same challenges before taking these policies and the leaves in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take those three now and have a response on them and then move for more questions. There was a question from Srinivas about the funding. So I think that was directed at Sebastian. And then the combined question about the matching of behavior with policy. Please use the microphones in front of you and also switch it off when you are finished.
So thank you for that question. I think that working within a big international organization, this is something that I struggle with, and many of us working struggle with, which is we have scarce resources to do a huge mandate of work. At the same time, when we look at the financial cost of what it means to have a policy that reflects the values that we stand for, the conversation is bogus. Because the reality of things is that we don't have rigorosity in terms of how much does it cost, how many people might be taking the leave, for how long, there's not much information on that is substantive enough to have a conversation to compare money with money. The flip side of that is that you have a lot of hidden costs that are not spoken about, that are being not paid by the employer, are paid by all of us. And I'll give you some examples. Organizations that talk about the importance of breastfeeding, for instance, but they do not have the facilities for mothers who decide to breastfeed to do it. They spend 2-3 hours at work doing it. They have to travel internationally. So how do we walk the talks on those elements? And the families and the women are paying that cost, right? So just to give you one. The second one is that when the parental leave is not substantive, then you might be out for a period of time, and the organization, instead of hiring somebody else, distribute the work among the other people. So the others are putting more hours, delivering the same kind of work or expected to be, and the organization is having no cost on this. So I do think that it is very important to do that, to have a real analysis of like, what are the benefits in terms of these policies vis-a-vis productivity, people that sleep, people that are able to navigate the work life that is pretty demanding for people that work in this sector, and for those who are working directly with INGOs. And at the same time, like I said before, go back to your donors. Talk to your donors about this. Because for me, I'll give you an example. If you have Open Society Foundation or the Gates Foundation, they offer between 24 and 26 fully paid weeks for their employees. And if you work for the Gates Foundation, you get $20,000 stipend when you become a parent. So why is it fair that some get those benefits and some others don't? And at the same time, why am I talking only about INGOs? It should be about the state, right? Companies paying the fair share of taxes so we can all have access to those resources. So I'm just taking a small angle that is where I live now, where I stand now, to try to share some experience, shed some light, but also ask to be mutually accountable for this, right? This is a two-way street. Tomorrow I might be in a state agency or in another organization, and I hope to be doing the same. So thank you for your question.
Well, making the connection between your question and the other question, I think it's great work what Oxfam Novib has been achieving, but it remains also vulnerable when it's a measure offered by an NGO, and that I think it's very important that we keep on advocating that at the final day, at the final point, it's also a responsibility of the government, paid by employers, etc. But then, once you get there, and for me this model remains quite useful, policy change is one, but it's not guaranteeing any shift in cultural thinking. For me, paternity leave is an important one, but it's not the magic bullet. It's not the magic ball for solving gender inequality. So the whole discussion you are referring to, I remember once I heard a case in Brazil, also paternity, men were ready to take paternity leave, but they were sent home by the women's organization because they were afraid that that it would add on the work at women at home. So the whole the shift in social norms, who's doing the care work, that's the discussion which you have to do within interracial within father groups. It's not only about fatherhood, but it's also how do we share the care work? Who is doing what? Supported by campaigns, supported by institutional shifts. So in that sense, we have to complement each other very much. A legal shift is important, but it's not the end. It's the beginning of a new thing. So we have to be very comprehensive and collaborating with each other, I think.
The computer is doing that without my intervention. The ding is not, yeah. So Jens, maybe a comment from you, and then I've got a question on Facebook, and I also saw two hands. So from Jens, and then we go to the question.
Okay. No, but I think it's very important that when men take out parental leave, that they also do the work. And we have seen even in Sweden that in some when the work is shared by men and women, fathers and mothers, the men takes when they are home at the same time, men takes a less part of the child support, and that's why I think it's so important that we have the reserved days where men themselves both take responsibility, but also can make that work by them own to find their way to because I think it's very individual how you do the care work, and that is an important aspect as well. I think I'll stop.
Thank you, Jens. So I'm going to take two questions. We're over time, so I'll take two questions and two responses to those, and then we'll break. We have a small bit of housekeeping to do. So let me go to Apta and then to the question that I saw Sam's hand earlier.
Just wanted to thank all the participants, and I want to emphasize Rahel's point that I don't think paternity leave is not a legal or social norm transformation. It's and social norm transformation. But Melanie Swan from Plan says, many thanks to all for the very interesting presentations, very inspired by the Oxfam journey, and would like to learn from this for Plan. Could the presenter from Rutgers share some more information about the costing tool? Is this available, and could it be used in other countries and organizations?
Thank you, Apta. And then Sam, you had a question?
It is not a question as such. Of course, I was going to maybe respond.
Sorry, Sam, not a very long. We're focusing on questions. If there's a comment, please bring it into the advocacy conversation tomorrow. I'm sorry. Maybe just a few words? So please go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, my point I was making the reference to the sister from Nigeria mentioning, I was going to say, we need to make a choice between either we should go for policy first and then involve the communities. And of course, going by the socio-ecological model, to me, it's important that we have one foot there, we have the way we have the supporting policy. Then the next step is to educate, sensitize the fathers, so that if they are given this leave, how can they use it?
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. So maybe Rachel to answer, and if anybody would like to make a closing comment from the panel, please indicate with a show of hands. So Sebastian has got a closing comment, and Tolu, and then we will close. So I'll actually go through all of the panelists, but please, brief comments, please. Starting with Rachel. Thank you.
Yes, I will share actually two tools. One is the cost tool, and also the Plan Your Pregnancy tool, which is meant for just pregnant couples, and it stimulates thinking and the discussion about that, not at the moment of birth that you have to start, how shall we do that? Very practical tools, and which we'll share it with the organizers. Sure.
The note I was just going to make is that one of the benefits of working with corporations, and part of the reason we are doing this work is because of the potential to also influence social norms. Many of them are those who, at certain points have been part of establishing some of the more negative norms that we've adopted, and those same tools can be used to identify ways to help people start to understand that we can think more expansively about how we engage in our families by modeling that and leveraging the research and resources and tools that they use on a day-to-day. So part of what we're thinking about with our work there is really thinking about how to leverage the tools and assets that companies like Twitter and Facebook have to also be able to sort of use them for good.
Latifa, please.
Rapidement, je voudrais juste partager avec vous une petite réflexion, c'est que le fait d'instaurer un congé de paternité, c'est en quelque sorte, on est en train d'instaurer une culture de partage des tâches,
sharing tasks, home tasks, and education of children. At the beginning, it's going to be something very new, but with time and with the leave becoming an obligation, men will get used to have that leave, and it's up to women now to impose the rules and ask for the education and tasks to be shared. This is just the point I wanted to make. So men will take the leave to stay at home and then leave home, but this is a culture that we are putting in place so that men can get used to them. Thank you.
Sebastian, please.
So just to reiterate that anyone who's working in an organization that wants to do this kind of work and is looking for people to partner with, reach out to me. We can do this together. We should do this together. We should co-create. I've been in touch with many organizations in the US, and they're very excited, but at the same time, very upset that this is not moving forward. And we have a wonderful resource, UNICEF. Let's use it. They're doing very interesting work. We have a wonderful resource, Promundo, the work done by the task. Let's use it. It's like we are standing in different places, but we're heading in the same direction. So there's no need to say, like, oh, no, I'm not going to engage with you on this.
Thank you. Jens?
Okay, I just want to emphasize on that policy level is a very important step, but it also has a need to continue the work on a structural level, both with, for example, child care services. We need to work on that, but we also have to work with childcare healthcare centers, where we also need to tell that both parents are important in the work with the children. We see that as a very important aspect in Sweden, and the individual support as well. And just to clarify one thing, in Sweden it's 30% of the total leave that is taken out by parents, but it's 90% and more of fathers that are taking out that part of the leave. So just to clarify.
Thank you. Please, Richard. Thank you. One final note from Umberto.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that I was very happy to be invited because we have seen really country level experiences that is actually something that I didn't have in my presentation. And we have also heard about the early childhood care and education, which is actually one of the crucial parts that we highlighted in the care report. Because yes, parental leave is very crucial, but it has to be planned in line with early childhood care and education. Because otherwise, if there is a gap between parental leave and early childhood care, then there can be a problem for fathers and mothers in the labor market.
Thank you so much, Umberto. Thank you so much to our panel.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to hand over to Opta. Thank you.
I know we're feeling a little bit tired. We want that tea break. But before we go to break, I just wanted to give a chance. We have afternoon workshops. And so I'd like the facilitators for the afternoon workshops to be able to give you a small a summary about what they'll be discussing later on today. So we're going to discuss that. The rooms are the same as they are on the agenda, so no worries about that part. But I'll start with, where is... there we go.
Thank you. Very briefly, as I mentioned in the morning, in our workshop, it's a very interactive session where we're going to share with you the SHOW project, which was implemented in 5 countries on mother and child health, the Fathers Club engagement strategy, the midterm results, and also there are 2 working sessions. In the first session, we'll give you a case study of a gender assessment and ask you to sort of brainstorm about a strategy to engage men. And the second session we'll share, or second workshop, you'll be asked to reflect upon the lesson learned which we had and the challenges which we faced. What are the areas or what are the advice the groups can advise us? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's going to be taken in this place in the Shayla room. There we go.
Hi, my name is Harriet Perlman. My session is called MenCare, but does anyone else? And we're going to explore how we take all the concerns, the passions, the actions, the requests out there. How do we make media and the public in general care about what we do?
Hi everyone, Dean Peacock here from Promundo. I'm up against stiff competition from the other groups, but stiff competition for your attention. And what we'll be focusing on really is this kind of trajectory of discussion we're trying to have here about the use of policy advocacy. What does it look like? How do we do it? What examples do we have? How do we shift the needle on those 5 commitments in the MenCare Pledge? And we've got a fantastic panel of people who will talk about the use of international instruments, global work with UN agencies, and country-specific examples. So come, it's going to be great. Thank you.
And that will be taking place here in this room.
And then we will have a workshop called We're All Family, Exploring Inclusive Parenting, which I will facilitate together with Soledad. And we will take into focus a number of examples for non-nuclear family settings. That is, for example, rainbow families. That is, for example, single parents and a nest family model. And we will present some figures about that, but we will work very interactive. We will work connecting one another, those who come, and think and reflect not only with our brains, but also with our bodies. And we as facilitators, we don't necessarily have the solution and all the answers, but we will work on those together.
And that will be taking place on the 4th floor in the boardroom. Thanks to you all. Those workshops will start promptly at 4. And then after they're done, we can all come back here for the closing recap, our artistic recap. Thank you so much. You can clap.